Shalom, shalom. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero with the Ways of Israel. This morning we're going to continue with the series of To Be a Jew, Signs of the Covenant, Love and Reverence. We're looking today at two aspects, and we've already seen the placing of tefillin, of talit, of the different signs of the covenant, which is a demonstration of our love and reverence to our Creator. One of the basic fundamental things that all Jews hold on to is what we call the Shema. Every Jew is required to recite the biblical passage known as Shema. O hear, O Israel, twice a day, morning and evening, in fulfillment of the precept that says, and you shall talk of them when you lie down and when you rise up. The morning and evening prayer incorporates this passage known as the Shema. How does it go? We're going to go through it right now. And it goes and it says, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. V'yahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. וחיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושינתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך, בביתך ובלכתך, בדרך ובשכבך ובחומך, וקשרתם לאות ידיך, וחיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על משושות ביתך ובישעריך. Translated. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God. The Lord is one. Blessed be the name of the glorious majesty forever and ever. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your means. And these words which I command you today shall be upon your heart, and teach them diligently to your children. Talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk on the road, when you lie down, and when you rise up. Bind them for a sign upon your hand and upon your frontlets between your eyes, and write them upon the doorposts of your house and upon your gates. Even though the Shema is an integral part of the morning and evening service, the Shema is not, technically speaking, a prayer. It's a declaration of faith. It's an affirmation of the unity of God that reminds us of our obligations to Him, that recalls the signs of the covenant and cautions against turning astray to follow vain desires of the heart and immorality for which the eyes may long for. Blessings that we say when we go up for the Torah. So this is also part of our service to God. Jewish tradition also regards the religious study as a form of divine worship, to provide the average worshiper with the opportunity to satisfy the minimum requirements of daily Torah study. The portions of the preliminary daily service includes a section not only from the Torah but also from the Mishnah and the Gemara or Talmud. The reading from the Torah constitutes a central part of Shabbat and festival service. The Torah is also read on Monday and Thursday morning services, Shabbat afternoon services, as well as on special occasions, such as Rosh Chodesh, which is the new moon, and the fast days. In ancient times, the Torah reading was accompanied by a translator, a meturgeman, who rendered it in colloquial tongue. In other words, Aramaic primarily back then, or in Greek. It was a verse-by-verse translation where the Hebrew is not easily understood. The rabbi's sermon elaborating the meaning of the selected portion of the Torah reading or use the text within the translation serves as a comparable purpose. When a person is called to the reading of the Torah, it is called an aliyah. In other words, he is ascending. He recites two blessings, the first one just before the reader reads the portion, and the second one immediately following the two blessings as follows. So here we have the person that's been called up to Aliyah. What is he to say? He picks up the two handles of the Torah or points to the Torah. If it's a Sephardic Torah, that's usually on the podium where they hold, and they hold on to it. They say, Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach, and the congregation responds. There's people in the congregation who's listening to the person saying the blessing at the Aliyah. Baruch atah Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Vaed. And then he repeats the response and continues. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. So with this intonation, by the way, you will find this in the book, page 165 of To Be a Jew. So it's very important that you read, and you also find that in the Siddur, the prayer book. So what is said is, bless the Lord who is blessed. Blessed is the Lord who is forever blessed. Blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has chosen us from among all people by giving us thy Torah. Blessed art thou, Lord, giver of the Torah. Now the Torah is then read, and after it is read, it is rolled up, or it is the closure of the Torah is closed, so you can say the following blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tuchenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. And concluding the reading of the person went up for the Aliyah will say, Blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has given us thy Torah of truth, and thereby planted among us life eternal. Interesting enough, this idea of eternal life comes in connection with the Torah that God has given the Jewish people. Blessed art thou, Lord, giver of the Torah. This is why Jews don't worry about Olam, where they're going to go after they pass away. Because they know that every single Jew who's involved in these commandments has already eternal life. So when a person already knows what he has and possesses, he doesn't worry about, what's going to happen, if he passes away. We are all in God's hands, and God guides our path. As a sign of this affection of the Torah, it is customary just before reciting each of the benediction to touch the Torah with the talit, and the place where the individual portion begins, and then kiss it with the talit. In other words, you take the talit, you kiss the portion you're going to read, you kiss it, and the person begins to recite the Torah portion after saying the blessing. While the first blessing is recited, it's proper that the Torah scroll remains open. While the second blessing is recited, the Torah scroll is rolled together, as it were closed already. Although it is permissible to worship in private, tefillat and yachid, our religious tradition has always been considered public worship, tefillat, sibur, preferable and more laudatory. Every effort to join a congregation in prayer should thus be made in this purpose. There's a certain sichut in praying with the congregation. Public worship cannot take place if there are fewer than 10 adult male Jews present. The reason why a female and a male child under 13 or a non-Jew cannot qualify to make minyan or quorum, although they may join the public worship service once a quorum is established, is that the person in these categories do not have the same religious obligation under Jewish law to join in public worship. According to this principle of Jewish law, persons with lesser obligation in any particular religious area do not, in that same area, enjoy the inherent privileges. For why would a woman, which are exempt from obligation, attend public worship? For that, we already touched on that on page 163, and I would recommend you rereading that if you have a question as to why. The quorum of 10 men are needed to conduct a public religious worship called a minyan. No, they're not the minyan, the characters. These are minyan as in the sense of a quorum. Literally, the word means a number or a few. The basis of 10 as a quorum, as a minyan, is a biblical passage found in Numbers chapter 14, verse 27, where the term Ada, which means congregation or community, is used. According to the rabbinic tradition, the reference here is that there were 10 scouts who were brought back to Moses the pessimistic report of their expedition into the land of Canaan. That any number less than 10 is not regarded as a community, a congregation, is alluded to in the Torah elsewhere as well. For example, Abraham stopped his bargaining with God for the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah after he reached the figure of 10. Genesis chapter 18, verse 16 through 33. As long as 10 righteous men could be found, the merits of the righteous community, though small, could be weighed against the sins of the wicked community. With less than 10, and they would be regarded only as a handful individuals whose personal merits cannot offset the collective wickedness of the community. The following portion of services are never said unless there is a minyan present. So when you have to do with Kaddish, the sanctification of God's name, Kedusha, a prayer in the Amidah, the 18 benediction, Baruch Hu, the call to bless God, Birkat Kohanim, the blessing of the priestly tribes that bless the congregation, the reader repetition of the Amidah, the 18 benediction, the reading of the Torah, all require a minyan to be present. The basis of requiring a minyan for prayer that sanctify God's name in the biblical passage from Leviticus chapter 22, verse 32, that I may be sanctified in the midst of the Israelite people. Sanctification of God's name is not a private matter, but a public act in the midst of a community. If less than necessary quorum gathers, the people may proceed to recite all the other prayers, excluding the enumerated privately as individuals and in unison under the leadership of the reader. Interesting, during the time that we were dealing with this pandemic, that people were recommended not to attend service, something very fascinating took place, which has revolutionized a lot of congregations, and that is that you can have a minyan while being on live, as long as you were able to see the other people davening in the majority. Let's say there were like 8 people davening, and they still needed, say, 2 more or 3 more. So they would click on a live feed, and they would be able to see each other live, and thus would be included in the major minyan that was being composed, and thus be counted as a minyan in fact. Interesting introduction, because this leads to a lot of what I've been saying, that when a person is live, they can see the other person. They're there, as it were, in presence. And this is a whole ramification that was caused as a result of what we went through. So everything works for good. Even this was a good that took place. And this is why you'll see some synagogues, even Orthodox, even Hasidic, will have their cameras on as they're davening, waiting for their minyan there locally to be completed, while other people are joining via Go Meet or Zoom or WhatsApp, and thus complete a minyan live, even though they may be from a different distance area. Interesting enough. Now, this has revolutionized, obviously, the whole idea of minyan, the whole idea of being present. And interesting enough, I made a whole entire video on this in English on my YouTube regarding even being present for areas like weddings and also conversion, which requires the presence of the Bet Din there. And I'll never forget Rabbi Lehrfield, who mentioned this, was basically the innovator of the idea, though he never wanted to take credit for it because he didn't want to deal with the whole entire body of rabbis in Israel on this topic. But there are many Orthodox rabbis that are doing this. So it's nothing new. They were able to do this for Gittin, divorces, able to do this for different areas. It requires the presence of a Bet Din there, and utilizing emissaries as well as live feed that they can see Even though some would say, oh, well, you're not seeing clearly. It's like through a mirror. No, no. As a matter of fact, you can see perhaps even better. And I may make this argument on my YouTube channel that sometimes it's better to see. Sometimes you're right, isn't as clear. And sometimes people present representing the Bedin are present to be able to make sure there's a safeguard in this whole entire process. But yes, there's no issue for me and for many other Orthodox Jews in utilizing technology in order to achieve the goals. The basis for requiring a minyan for prayer that sanctify God's name is the biblical passage in Leviticus chapter 22, verse 32, that I may be sanctified in the midst of the Israelite people. The sanctification of God's name is not a private matter at all, but a public act in the midst of a community. If less than the necessary quorum gathers, the people may proceed to recite all other prayers, excluding those enumerated in privately as individuals or in unison with the other leaders as they are reading. Now let's go into another area of prayer in our next video regarding various food and occasions. So stay tuned. This is only on the issues of Shema. So muy important. This is part of our prayer service or tefillah. So continue with me as we continue going through the signs of the covenant, love and reverence.